The first thing I noticed was the smell. Not incense. Not old wood. It smelled like wet dirt, and something rotten. Then I heard someone running across the church roof above me. I froze halfway down the aisle, my flashlight shaking in my hand. The sound stopped instantly, right over my head. And then something heavy dragged slowly across the ceiling. I grew up in a tiny mountain town in West Virginia. There wasn't much there except forests, empty roads, and an abandoned church sitting miles outside town near an old logging trail. Everyone called it Mercy Hill Church. Nobody went near it anymore. Not because of ghost stories. Those never scared me. It was because of what happened there in 2004. A family of 3 disappeared after camping nearby. Their truck was found outside the church parking lot, unlocked. Phones and wallets still inside. No bodies were ever found. People blamed the woods. Wild animals. Maybe someone got lost. But after that, locals started reporting strange things around the church at night. Flashlights moving inside. Singing. Footsteps. Once, a hunter claimed he heard someone crying for help from the basement. Police searched the place multiple times and found nothing. Years later, when I was 23, I made the stupid decision to go there alone. I wasn't trying to prove anything. I had just broken up with my girlfriend, lost my job, and honestly didn't care much about danger back then. I liked exploring abandoned places. It distracted me from my own life. I parked my truck near the trail around 8 p.m. and hiked the rest of the way. The church looked worse than I expected. Half the windows were broken. The white paint had peeled away years ago. The front doors hung open slightly, moving with the wind. The forest around it was dead quiet. No insects. No birds. Just wind moving through the trees. I remember stopping before walking inside because I suddenly felt wrong. Like I wasn't alone out there. I kept looking back toward the woods. Nothing. But the feeling stayed. I switched on my flashlight and entered the church. The inside was cold. Much colder than outside. Pews were overturned everywhere. Mold covered the walls. The old cross behind the altar had fallen sideways onto the floor. That's when I noticed fresh footprints in the dust. Not animal tracks. Boot prints. Recent. I crouched down and touched one. The dust around it was still disturbed. Someone had been there very recently. I should have left right then. Instead, I followed them. The prints led toward a hallway beside the altar. At the end was a staircase going underground. The basement door was already open. I stood there listening for almost a full minute. Nothing. Then, a small metallic sound echoed from below. Like someone setting down a tool. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. I don't know why I kept going. Curiosity, maybe. The basement smelled horrible. Wet concrete and mildew, mixed with something sour. My flashlight swept across old storage shelves and broken furniture. Then I saw a mattress on the floor. Not old. New. Beside it were empty water bottles, canned food, batteries, and folded blankets. Someone was living down there. My chest tightened instantly. I backed toward the stairs slowly, trying not to make noise. That's when I heard breathing behind me. Close. Very close. I spun around so fast I nearly fell. Nothing was there. But the breathing stopped the exact second I turned. I rushed up the stairs and slammed the basement door shut. My heart was pounding hard now. I headed for the main entrance, trying to stay calm. Then I heard footsteps above me. Heavy footsteps. Walking slowly across the ceiling. Back and forth. Back and forth. I looked up instinctively even though I knew nobody should have been up there. The church didn't even have a second floor. The sound stopped directly over me. Then came a loud thud. Dust fell from the ceiling. Another thud. Like someone crawling. I ran for the front doors. But before I reached them, I saw movement outside one of the broken windows. A man. Standing between the trees. He was tall. Thin. Wearing dark clothes. And he was staring directly at me. I stopped moving. Then another figure appeared farther back in the woods. Then another. At least 3 people. Just standing there silently. Watching. Every survival instinct in my body kicked in at once. I sprinted toward the exit. The moment I touched the front door, it slammed shut from the outside. Hard. I stumbled backward. Then came pounding. Not on the door. On the walls. From all around the church. Boom. 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 Like multiple people hitting the building with their hands. I couldn't think straight anymore. I ran back through the hallway, desperate for another exit. That's when I heard someone whisper behind me. "Don't go outside." I turned and saw an old man sitting in one of the pews. I swear to God he hadn't been there before. He looked filthy. Huge beard. Hollow eyes. He raised a shaking finger toward the windows. "They wait in the trees," he whispered. I couldn't even speak. The pounding outside suddenly stopped. Complete silence filled the church. The old man looked terrified now. Tears rolled down his face. Then he whispered something that still makes me sick thinking about it. "They like when people run." At that exact moment, glass exploded behind me. A hand grabbed my jacket through the broken window. I screamed and tore free. More hands reached through other windows. Not random. Coordinated. Like they'd done this before. The old man suddenly bolted toward a side door near the altar. I followed him without thinking. We burst outside into the woods behind the church and ran downhill through complete darkness. I could hear people chasing us immediately. Branches snapping. Footsteps everywhere. They weren't yelling. That was the worst part. They were completely silent. Just running after us through the trees. The old man was crying while he ran. He kept saying, "Don't stop, don't stop." Then I heard him scream. I looked back for half a second and saw 3 figures tackle him to the ground. I kept running. I hate myself for that. But I kept running. I reached my truck somehow, shaking so hard I dropped my keys twice. As I finally started the engine, I looked toward the tree line. At least 6 people stood there. Perfectly still. Watching me leave. Police searched the area the next day after I reported everything. They found the church. They found the basement supplies. But they never found the old man. Or the people in the woods. A few weeks later, a detective contacted me privately. He told me they discovered something buried behind the church. Bones. Human bones. More than one person. He sounded nervous while telling me. Before hanging up, he asked me one strange question. He asked if I noticed whether the people chasing me were wearing shoes. I said no. There was a long silence on the phone. Then he quietly told me something I'll never forget. All the footprints around the graves were barefoot. I heard someone whisper my name from inside the church basement, even though I was completely alone in the building. The whisper sounded close. Right behind my ear. And when I turned around, I noticed the basement door was open. I had locked it myself an hour earlier. I grew up in a small mountain town in northern Oregon. The place was quiet most of the year. Just trees, dirt roads, and long stretches of fog that sat between the hills like smoke. At the edge of town, deep past the last row of houses, there was an old church called St. Matthew's Chapel. It wasn't abandoned exactly, but nobody really used it anymore. The pastor had died years earlier and services stopped after that. The building still belonged to the county, though, so a few volunteers would clean it once every month to stop it from completely falling apart. That's how I ended up there. I was 22 at the time and needed extra cash. A local maintenance guy named Carl paid me $50 to clean the church before winter storms rolled in. Easy job. Dust the pews. Sweep the floors. Check for leaks. He gave me one warning before I left. "Don't stay after dark," he said. I laughed a little and asked why. He shrugged. "Place sits too far from town. Weird people wander through the woods sometimes." That answer stuck with me longer than I expected. I got there around 4 in the afternoon. The church sat alone in a clearing surrounded by huge pine trees. No nearby houses. No traffic. Just wind moving through branches. The building looked worse up close. The white paint had peeled off years ago. Several windows were cracked. One side of the roof sagged slightly. But inside, it was strangely clean. Too clean. The air smelled like wet wood and old paper. Every sound echoed. Even my footsteps felt loud enough to bother someone. I started cleaning the main room first. Everything was normal for the first hour or so. Then I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow footsteps. Thump. 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 I froze with the broom still in my hands. The church had a small second-floor balcony overlooking the pews. I remember staring up into the darkness, waiting to see someone leaning over the railing. Nothing. I told myself it was probably an animal. Still, the footsteps stopped the exact second I looked up. That bothered me. I grabbed my flashlight and checked the balcony. Empty. Thick dust everywhere except for one narrow path through the center. Fresh footprints. Not animal prints. Boots. I actually smiled nervously at first because I figured maybe Carl had been there earlier. But then I noticed something strange. The prints only went one direction. Toward the staircase. None came back. By then the sun was already dropping behind the trees outside. The inside of the church became darker fast. I remember feeling this pressure in my chest, this strong urge to leave immediately. But I wanted the money. So I kept cleaning. Around 6 o'clock, I went to the basement to check a water leak Carl mentioned. The basement stairs were narrow and steep. The air down there felt colder than the rest of the church. My flashlight barely reached the back wall. That's when I heard breathing. Very soft. Not mine. I stopped moving. The breathing stopped too. For a few seconds there was complete silence. Then, a small scraping sound came from somewhere behind the furnace. I whispered, "Hello?" Nothing answered. I stepped closer anyway. That was my mistake. The second my light moved past the furnace, someone bolted out from the darkness. A man. Tall. Filthy. Beard down to his chest. He slammed into me so hard I hit the wall. I remember the smell most clearly, sweat, dirt, and something rotten. He sprinted upstairs without saying a word. I chased after him automatically, mostly out of panic, but when I reached the main room, the front doors were still chained shut from the inside. I know they were. I stared at the chain for several seconds trying to understand. Then I heard movement above me again. The balcony. Heavy footsteps running from one side to the other. I backed away slowly. My flashlight shook in my hand. "Listen," I yelled. "I'm leaving, all right? You can stay here." The footsteps stopped. Then I heard another sound. A laugh. Not loud. Just this quiet, breathy laugh from directly above me. I ran for the side exit near the storage room. The handle wouldn't budge. Swollen wood from rain had jammed the door shut. That's when the lights went out. Complete darkness. I stood there frozen, hearing movement somewhere inside the church. Floorboards creaking. Slow steps. Closer. I clicked my flashlight back on. And I wish I hadn't. The man was standing at the end of the aisle between the pews. Just staring at me. He wasn't homeless like I first thought. His clothes were dirty, but organized. Layers. Heavy boots. Hunting knife on his belt. And behind him, sitting on the front pew, was another person. A woman. Her hands were tied behind her back. A dirty cloth covered her mouth. Her eyes looked swollen from crying. The man tilted his head at me slowly, almost curious. Then he smiled. I ran toward the chained front doors and started yanking at the lock so hard my fingers bled. Behind me, I heard him walking calmly down the aisle. Not rushing. Just walking. I finally got the chain loose and shoved the doors open. Cold air hit me instantly. I sprinted into the woods toward my truck. And halfway there, I heard screaming from inside the church. Muffled screaming. The woman. I stopped running. For maybe 3 seconds I actually considered going back. Then I heard the man yell something. Not words exactly. More like angry roaring. Branches snapped behind me. He was coming outside. I jumped into my truck, locked the doors, and sped down the dirt road so fast I nearly crashed twice. Police reached the church about 40 minutes later. The man was gone. But they found the woman alive in the basement. She'd been missing for 8 days. And they found something else too. A small room hidden behind the furnace. Inside were sleeping bags, canned food, ropes, hunting gear. And photographs. Dozens of photographs. Pictures of people inside the church. Volunteers. Travelers. Lost hikers. Some of the photos were years old. But one picture had been taken that same evening. It showed me cleaning the pews from the balcony above. Taken before I ever heard the footsteps. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw the church doors chained from the outside. Not locked. Chained. And the worst part was, I could still hear singing coming from inside. It happened 3 years ago when I was driving through northern Montana on my way to visit my cousin. I'd taken a shortcut through an old mountain road after my GPS lost signal. It was late October. Cold. Fog everywhere. Barely any cars passed me for over 2 hours. Around 9 p.m., my truck started overheating. I pulled over near a dirt trail surrounded by pine trees. No lights. No houses. Just darkness and the sound of wind moving through the forest. I had almost no phone signal, so I grabbed my flashlight and followed the trail, hoping to find help. About 15 minutes in, I saw a church. It looked abandoned at first. Small wooden building. White paint peeling off the walls. One crooked cross hanging above the entrance. There were no nearby homes. No cars. Nothing. But I could hear people singing inside. Soft at first. Then louder. Church hymns. I remember feeling relieved. I figured maybe there was a late-night gathering or something. I walked closer, and that's when I noticed the heavy chain wrapped around the front door handles. From the outside. I stopped walking. The singing continued. I stood there trying to make sense of it. Maybe there was another entrance. Maybe someone chained it after people went inside. I don't know. But something about it felt wrong. The windows were covered with dark cloth from the inside. I couldn't see anything. Then the singing suddenly stopped. Dead silent. I remember my stomach tightening instantly. A few seconds later, I heard footsteps inside. Slow footsteps. Moving toward the front door. I backed away from the porch without even thinking. The footsteps stopped right on the other side of the door. Then somebody whispered, "Help me." Not loudly. Not panicked. Just quiet and exhausted. I froze. A man's voice spoke right after that. "Please, he's coming back." I walked up to the door and shouted, asking what was happening. No response at first. Then multiple voices started talking over each other from inside. Whispering fast. Terrified. I couldn't understand half of it. But I caught one sentence clearly. "Don't let him see you." The floorboards behind me creaked. I spun around so fast my flashlight slipped from my hand. There was a man standing near the trees about 30 feet away. Tall. Skinny. Wearing dark overalls and a hunting jacket. He wasn't moving. I couldn't even see his face properly, but I knew he was staring at me. My heart started hammering. I yelled at him, asking what was going on. Nothing. He just stood there. Then slowly, he lifted one hand and pointed toward the church. That's when I heard banging from inside. Violent banging. People screaming. Not screaming for help. Screaming in pure panic. I ran to the chain and tried pulling it loose, but it was wrapped tight with a padlock. The people inside were crying now. Begging me to open it. Then I heard another sound behind me. Footsteps. Crunching through leaves. Closer. I turned around. The man was walking toward me now. Slowly. Still not saying a word. I grabbed my flashlight and backed away from the church porch. I remember shining the beam directly at his face, but he lowered his head immediately like he didn't want me seeing him. Then the church went silent again. Instantly. No screams. No banging. Nothing. The only sound left was the man's boots crushing wet leaves as he kept walking toward me. I panicked and ran around the side of the church. There was another door in the back. Also chained shut. But near the rear wall, I found a small basement window cracked open. I dropped to my knees and shined my flashlight inside. At first I thought the basement was empty. Then I saw them. People. At least 6 or 7 people huddled together on the floor in total darkness. Their mouths were taped shut. Their hands tied. One woman was staring directly at me with tears streaming down her face. I almost screamed. The singing hadn't been real. Someone had been playing recordings through speakers. That's when a hand grabbed my shoulder. Hard. I spun around swinging my flashlight wildly and hit the man across the face. He stumbled backward and for the first time I saw him clearly. His nose exploded with blood. And he smiled. Not angry. Not surprised. Just smiling. He reached into his jacket. I thought he had a gun. I ran. I didn't even look back. I sprinted through the trees while hearing him crashing after me. Branches snapping. Heavy breathing. At one point I heard him laughing behind me. I finally reached the road and jumped into my truck. The engine barely started. As I drove away, I saw headlights coming from deeper in the woods behind the church. Another vehicle. Then another. I drove nearly 20 miles before finding signal and calling the police. They found the church the next morning. The basement was empty. No people. No speakers. No chains. Nothing. The building had been abandoned for almost 12 years. But they did find something. Fresh blood on the basement floor. And my flashlight. The police questioned me for hours. They thought I made the whole thing up until 2 months later. A state trooper called me after a missing persons case connected to the area reopened. Over 11 people had disappeared along those mountain roads over the last decade. Hikers. Drivers. Tourists. One of them was a woman. Her body was discovered buried less than half a mile behind that church. Her mouth had been covered with duct tape. The trooper asked me one question before hanging up. He asked if I remembered hearing a woman crying in the basement. I told him yes. Then he told me the woman they found had been dead for almost 8 years.